Hello, this is Krista Moore with The Krista Moore Show. I'm so glad you're joining us today. This show is brought to you by K Coaching and ID Growth as a new way to learn. We decided to put together a talk show format so that I'm interviewing experts and thought leaders, and they can share their ideas and their stories and growth strategies, all to help you continue to develop and grow your business. So I'm glad you've joined today. And my guest is Alice Heiman from Alice Heiman LLC. Alice, are you there? She's definitely a well-known sales strategist, coach, speaker. We met at Women's Sales Pros. Very impressed with the work that you've done. So I'm glad that you took the time out to be on the show today. And our subject is this is sales leadership. And we could talk about this for hours.
Absolutely, and we have. I love our topic, so I'm excited.
Well, I'd love for you to do an introduction to the audience, let them know who you are, a little bit about your background, and I want to make sure you mention your family history.
Absolutely. So I am Alice Heiman, and some of you may have heard of a company called Miller Hyman, which is a sales training company that's been around a long time. It was founded by my father, Steve Hyman, and his partner, Bob Miller. And they sold that company in 1998, but Miller Hyman is still going strong. It's a wonderful company. They still have our premier products, strategic selling and conceptual selling, and large account management. So look into that if you don't know who Miller Hyman is. It's a wonderful company, and their methodologies really work. I still use them today, and I meet Miller Hyman fans all over the world, which is really delightful to hear people tell me stories of how those processes and methodologies changed the way that they sell and really help them be hugely successful. So proud to have that heritage. My company is Alice Heiman LLC. I've been in business over 20 years on my own with that company as a sales consultant who helps owner-led and investor-backed high growth companies to increase their sales by helping them with their sales organization, their sales process, and their people. And I can't tell you how much fun that is. But recently, because I had nothing to do between 9 and midnight, I decided to launch another company. So I took a bit of curriculum out of Alice Heiman LLC and spun it out on its own. And that new company I co-founded with Diana Gurian is called Trade Show Makeover. And we are focusing on the sales side of trade shows. So you can look up tradeshowmakeover.com.
I love it. And when I was seeing you launch this new company, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, why hasn't someone done this already? So often, we attend trade shows or we have a booth at a trade show, and I once heard that it's only as good as the follow-up, right? So I'm sure that you teach and train a lot about selling at the trade shows, but how to expand that relationship afterwards.
Absolutely. Owners and investors spend a lot of money on that lead generation mechanism. So trade shows are a lead generator for them, but many times they don't understand really how to do it properly. And so it becomes just a huge spend without the return on investment.
That's right. Or by the end of the trade show, they're like, oh, the traffic wasn't good, or there wasn't enough people. They're not looking at what could they have done better to take that time and really capitalize on it, because that's their audience, right? So I'm really happy for you. I think you guys are going to do a great job with that.
Thank you.
So as far as sales leadership goes, both of us have that background. And you write and speak and train and coach around the importance of business owners having a sales style, sales approach, and how important that is for the business growth. And I find that fascinating. And that's really what I want to talk about today. What are some of the things that you've discovered? What are some tips or techniques that we could give to business owners today so that they can up-level the sales side of what they do as well? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you see the biggest frustration for business owners when it comes to sales?
So in the 20 plus years that I have been doing this, I have had the great pleasure to work with CEOs who are also the owner of the company. Many of the companies are family owned still. Many of the companies are investor backed. And so we have tremendous pressure either way from all of these different stakeholders on the company to sell more, right, and grow. Now, sometimes these companies are also growing by acquisition, and that's great too, but then when you merge with another company, you still have sales problems. So really always comes down to how are we going to use the resources we have to sell more and to do it profitably, because just increasing revenue doesn't always solve our problems, right? We need cash flow, so it helps there, but we need profitability as well. And so with the leaders of these companies, what I find is a challenge is that many of them do not come from a sales background. They maybe came from a larger company, that they came from finance, they might have come from operations, they maybe even came from legal. These are the people who tend to become CEOs, not usually sales leaders, although we are starting to see more of it. So now they own the company and they don't have that sales background, but sales becomes part of what they need to do every day. And in the case of a family-owned company, maybe they grew up in the family company, but still didn't get to do the sales part of it. So their challenge is just simply not really understanding sales very well, or maybe only understanding one part of the sales process. If they came out of sales, they have a little understanding, but not really how to build a strategy for an entire organization. And so they're frustrated because they're not getting the sales that they need.
Yeah. When I think about these business owners that need to up-level their sales leadership or sales understanding, I would imagine that there's probably 3 or 4 things, let's say, that they could do if they put the time and the energy into it to at least expand their horizons or get more experience in that area, because that would be essential, right? So what would you suggest are 3 or 4 things that they could do right away?
Yeah, well, depending on where they are in the life cycle of their company, if they're a startup, oftentimes the owner or leader is selling because they're a startup, and that's what they have to do as part of it, even though they may not feel that they're very good at sales. But even if the company is 30 years old, right, then the leader still has a role in sales. So I would say that the very first thing is to take time and assess yourself as a sales leader. So as a company leader, you should probably assess yourself and all the skills you need and how you're doing as a company leader. But let's separate that for a moment and assess ourselves as the sales leader. So as the sales leader of this company, even if I have a sales manager or a sales VP, or even if I have a chief revenue officer, I, as the owner of this company, leader of this company, CEO of this company, I still have a role in sales. So taking a look at that, number one, what is my role? And how am I doing in that role?
Yeah,
am I doing a good job or not a very good job?
I just thought of something as you were describing that. There is an assessment that we put together years ago called the Sales Management System and Style Assessment. And you can actually go to kcoaching.com and download it. A lot of our listeners may have already taken it, but it will kind of scoreboard you, so to speak, and show you where your gaps are between, where you are today. We actually divide it into, you're either a coach, a nice guy, or an MIA. But we often find that the sales leaders, when we get the results of the assessment, they end up falling in that nice guy category. It's interesting.
Oh, yeah. Way too nice, and keeping salespeople on way too long when they don't do their job. But here's what I really want people to think about. Number one, I want you to think about strategy. If you're the leader of a company, you are there to set the strategy for the whole company. But have you set the sales strategy? So within that larger strategy, assess yourself on sales strategy. Do you have that piece down?
Yeah.
Right?
Let's talk about sales strategy a little bit, because I think that the word strategy often comes into play and they make it more complicated than it needs to be, perhaps, right? So when we think of strategy and sales strategy, are there key components that need to be there? And what do you usually teach and train around that?
Basically, it's asking the question, what will we do and how will we do it, right? So if we want to grow our sales to X millions of dollars, first of all, is that reasonable and logical? Just because the investors want 20% or 100% or 160% growth doesn't mean that that's reasonable and logical. And you, as the sales leader of your company, have to come up with a backing for that. So if you come up with a number, right, as your strategy, you have to understand how can you meet that number? Is there market demand? Now, if you have a really big number and you have a very small sales team, that probably isn't going to work unless you're planning on doing several acquisitions. So your strategy to increase your sales may include acquisitions, it may include your current sales team, and it may include growing your sales team. So that's one piece of the strategy. And then within that, exactly what will the sales teams be doing in order to increase the sales? So it's really as simple as that. What are you going to do and how are you going to do it? Yeah. And I like to just layer in that proof. Is there proof that that's possible, that can be done? Otherwise, we just frustrate everyone.
Well, and I'll add to that too. I'll put another layer on that with you is, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? That further assessment, right? Like we were talking about assessing our own sales leadership skills to see what we need to do different and better to be more effective. If we look at a strategy and we're saying, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? It's also great to look at your customers and what their needs are, how have their needs changed, understand the competition. Right. And what's the competition doing? Not that you want to do what they're doing, but you want to be better or different than what they're doing. How can you differentiate yourself? Mm-hmm. And kind of what's happening around you that is a little bit out of your control, whether that's the economy, whether that's your geography, or maybe it's your internal structure. And then say, okay, what can we do? What can we do to get to this number with the lowest cost, but the fastest, that's going to get us the results that we need. And hopefully you're then able to prioritize on those to-dos. What we need to do, this, and this. That's the priority in order to move that.
So we want low cost, high profitability, right? Yeah. And how we're going to do it. And then I think, again, another layer is, what's my role in that? So besides building this strategy, which mm-hmm. is my role for sure, then as they deploy the strategy, what is my role as the leader?
Yeah, let's talk about the role. So let's say I'm a business owner. I'm also the sales leader. I don't want to ignore that I have a significant responsibility to executing that sales strategy. And what are some things that you would advise them to make sure that they incorporate in their style or their own management system?
I think that being the sales leader also makes you the person who has to lead the team to victory, even if you have a sales manager. But many of the business owners that you and I work with, they also lead their sales team. So it is absolutely their job to lead everyone to victory, to be the cheerleader, to make sure that the team has everything they could possibly need to be successful. I think being that resource administrator is super important. When sales are failing, do not look at the sales team, look at yourself and determine whether you have done everything you can, whether you're providing everything you can to that sales team to help them be successful. Also, like you mentioned earlier, look at the things around you, like the economy, to see what role is that playing. So if you're the one who's leading them on to victory and cheering them on, it's your job to make sure they have all the tools they need, all the support they need, the training they need. Even if you have a sales leader in place, you've got to make sure that person has a proper plan and budget to provide all of these things to the salespeople. Way too often, the role is to scold or to yell at or to, have to fire people. It's like, well, you guys are doing a terrible job in sales. What's going on here? It's always very, adversarial instead of very supportive. So sales isn't doing what we want. The investors are now yelling at me. The stakeholders are all yelling at me as the leader, and now I go yell at the sales leader, what the heck is going on here? Got to get rid of some people, got to do this. Well, that is very adversarial, and that does not help. So we are looking the wrong direction when sales are failing. Instead of looking out at the sales leader and the sales team, you must first look at yourself and your role and what you are doing.
Yeah,
and then once you've looked at that, then only then can you look back out to see what you've put in place and why it is or isn't working, whether they have the resources or they don't. And maybe there are some bad hires and you will need to do something about that. But look at yourself and your role first before you start looking out.
Yeah, I want to give an example of a similar situation. When I started with Corporate Express, which is now Staples, they through a lot of mergers and acquisitions. But when I got to North Carolina, I was the sales leader, and I was a new sales leader. They hadn't had one in place for a long time. And they had lost, I don't know, millions and millions of dollars in the past 6 months before I got there. So I had to really do an assessment of like, what's the situation here? Like, what's working, what's not working? And there were a lot of holes and there was a lot of work to be done. But one thing that I realized is sales was getting blamed for everything. It's a sales problem, it's a sales problem. And after I assessed it, I'm thinking, you know what? We have an operations problem. It's not just a sales problem. The deliveries weren't getting there in time. Customers were leaving because they were dissatisfied with customer service. And so there were a number of other factors as to why the growth wasn't where they wanted it to be. And that just reminded me of that story. And maybe a thought to business owners is don't automatically, point the fingers as to the reason you're not growing is that it's a sales problem, because it might not be. There could be other things, including yourself, right?
Exactly. No, I had a similar situation with a business owner who was putting so much pressure on the salespeople to sell, but the product that they were delivering had defects. And he was like, I don't care. Go back to them and sell them something else. So the customer's really unhappy because they got this defective material. And the salesperson's trying to deal with all of that and get them what they need. And, it's already ruined, it was in manufacturing, so it stopped their production line for days on end because they had to get a reshipment of something that wasn't effective. And then this business owner who had a lot of pressure from his investors was, really horrible. Yelling at the salespeople, I don't care what, I don't care. Call them up and sell them something else. And he would literally stand there, and make them call. And it was just absolutely horrible for the salespeople. A lot of them did leave, but it was surprising to me that any of them stayed.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that pressure makes people act in really bad behavior, but that was absolutely an operations problem. Those salespeople couldn't even call many of their customers to get another order because they were being delivered defective products. You cannot blame that on sales. Of course, sales are down.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think there's many business owners that are listening to this now are thinking, gee, maybe I need to open up my lens a little bit and look in other areas where we could improve our processes or our systems to be more effective at sales. One other thing that you and I have spoken about in the past is about how the business owner can be a part of the sales process and play a role of a sales leader in a lot of ways. But sometimes they shy away from that. What is your experience there?
I think owners who have never been in sales definitely shy away from being part of the sales process, and they don't necessarily want to talk to customers. But what happens if they don't insert themselves in the sales process is the only time they ever talk to customers is when something goes wrong. And that's not a good position to be in. Really, as the business leader, your role is to develop very strong relationships with key stakeholders in your customers and prospects. So in the sales cycle, before the deal closes, salespeople can bring the owner in, the CEO in, and position them properly. Now, don't bring them in and position them with salespeople, of course not. But when there's a general manager or another owner, it's important to get those meetings set up so that they can build relationships. The owner doesn't need to do the selling. We have a salesperson for that. They need to build a relationship, perhaps attend an event or do a dinner or something, a site visit, but they're more of a subject matter expert, and in a thought leader role, they can give ideas and this, really simply build the relationship so that the prospect or the customer feels comfortable talking to them if they need to. In the case of, the deal being closed and now you have a customer, if the CEO owner has not been introduced yet, then it's time to introduce them at that point. Find the right person at the highest level in that company. Now, if they're a bazillion-dollar company and you're a $10 million company, your CEO is never going to get to know their CEO, but there's someone at the top of of the area that you're working with, the GM or somebody who leads that area, that the CEO could be positioned with and build a relationship with in person and online or in any way, so that they can check in to see how things are going before things go wrong.
Yeah.
They can be brought in to brainstorm, and they're not only talking to unhappy customers. However, in the situation I was just telling you about with that CEO, he could have done a lot of good by calling those customers who got those bad shipments, talking to somebody at a higher level and saying, I apologize. We are taking care of this problem as quickly as we can because your business is so important to us. So please let us make it right. Mm-hmm. Then when the salesperson called back to sell them something again, they'd be like, wow, we had a problem, but they fixed it. And the CEO even called our CEO, and it's all good now, so we'll buy from you again.
It's even funny you shared that story. When I was telling you about the operations problem, and I just got there and I was new in the role, I saw very large customers just leaving, and very surprisingly, but I asked the sales reps to make me a list of the top 50 accounts that are at risk. And I did spend 3 days, and this maybe is a to-do for a sales leader or a business owner, is I spent the 3 days on the phone, and I would try and get a hold of a higher level executive, but I would let them know that we're having some distribution problems. I appreciate them, being loyal to us. And just I introduced myself as the new sales leader. If you have any problems, questions, give me a call. And I did get phone calls. I got 3 phone calls back out of those 50, and I think could have prevented them from just leaving. So when we talk about stepping up to being a part of the sales process, whether it's retention or conversion or prospecting, there is a role there, and it doesn't take much time, it doesn't take much energy, but it can be really impactful. So I guess I would challenge our listeners to be thinking, what can I do to inject myself into the sales process to make it, to make it better?
Here's another really simple thing that a CEO can do to be a part of the sales process. They can write a letter welcoming a new customer and send it in the mail or an email. I recommend the mail. And it's just a short letter welcoming the new customer and letting them know how to reach them should anything arise that they needed to be reached for, and gets sent to the senior executives of that company. In the case of smaller businesses where it is a lot more personal, like the companies that I work with, I write a handwritten note to the CEO complimenting their team, what a great job their team is doing, and letting them know that they can reach me anytime. Now, usually I'm very much in touch with the CEOs, but I still write them a note thanking them so much for the opportunity to work with them and their team and complimenting their team. Very simple, but I just use beautiful little note cards that local artists around Nevada have done, and it gives them a little flavor of where I live because they're photographs, and then it's just a nice note. And the thing is, when I go visit them, I see those notes pinned somewhere in their office or on their desk because it meant so much that I took the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we train and teach a lot around business reviews, as a means for retention or penetration strategies. And we encourage the business owner or the sales leader to make sure that they're on that business review with the sales rep, because you want a higher level person from the customer there as well. And that's a great time to begin establishing a relationship that then you can, keep moving forward.
Yeah, important to get the salesperson to help you get positioned properly so they can say, our owner likes to be on these business reviews. Who from your company should meet our owner and be on this review with us?
That's right. It's a good way to move that relationship up. Any other thoughts when it comes to understanding how a business owner or sales leader can interject themselves into the process?
Well, I actually, at my company and with the owners I work with, like to get on and just hear what's going on with the deals. So, coming from Miller Hyman, and many of my companies use the Miller Hyman products, especially strategic selling. We have these strategic analysis sheets that we fondly call blue sheets. And I like to sit in on the blue sheet sessions occasionally. And I encourage the owners, CEOs, to sit in on them as well, because many times they have ideas that they can help the salespeople with in their strategy to get positioned to close a deal. I also like to be in on and have the owners be in on the deals that we lost when we are just taking a look at, here's the deals we lost this month. Let's talk about why do we think we lost them? What happened? Did it go to the competitor? And we're just really kind of doing a retrospective on what we lost. We also do it on the things that we won. So that's another good time for the CEO owner to be involved, is when we are kind of digesting that and looking at what we won and what we lost and why we did that. So I think that's a great time to be involved in the sales process.
Yeah.
And then sometimes just talking to the owner to see who they know, because you're trying to break into a company, and a lot of times your CEO is already connected to somebody at that company and you didn't even bother to ask. So the owner, CEO, company leader should always look at the sales funnel and all of the opportunities that salespeople are trying to close, because they might actually have a connection that could make the difference.
Yeah, that's so true. And we forget about that. I mean, that, until maybe it's too late. So we've shared a lot of tips and techniques on how business owners can kind of up-level their sales leadership. And I'm wondering if there's like a go-to guide or some learning and development that you think that they could subscribe to. Any thoughts on that? I mean, I know a lot of our listeners have the Race to Amazing book, and we have a Race to Amazing online program now that just got launched to all of our Advantage dealers. So anyone that's on the line that is an Advantage dealer for SP Richards, you now can access Race to Amazing in an online course that is like 13 courses in one curriculum. So that is definitely there for a lot of people. Anything else you would recommend?
I'd love to hear that. So of course, yes, use those resources. There's a lot of great thought leaders out there today talking about how to be a great sales leader. So I think, you can look a few of them up. I don't want to start naming too many because I'll get in trouble for leaving some of them out. And there's so many great ones, but I will talk about one of my favorites. My friend Kevin Davis wrote the book, The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness. And I do love that resource. It's easy to read. It's very complete. It's short and concise. And it really gives you a good overview of what a sales manager should be doing. Another great one is Bill Ekstrom, and he just released a new book on coaching that I highly recommend. So, as a sales leader, as a company leader as well, you need to both manage and coach. And they're very different skills, and most of us don't know how to do either one very well. We tend to be better managers than we do coaches. But to really level up an organization and really get the sales growth that you need, as a leader, you must become an excellent coach, because that's how we develop our people. We don't want them to just be able to take direction. We want them to be able to think for themselves and learn and grow and become better and better and better. So we must really be good coaches.
Yeah.
But there's so much good stuff out there. If you follow me on LinkedIn or on my Smart Sales Tips, I have great blogs that will help you become a better sales leader as well. So many resources out there, and you can private message me and I can give you some more.
We're going to share your contact information, Alice. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, they can, and certainly get connected with you on LinkedIn. So we'll share a slide here. And also what isn't on there is the trade show makeover. And if someone's interested in that, they can certainly give you a call. But I want to thank you for joining us today. It's always a great conversation to talk about sales leadership, and I appreciate you taking the time out for that. So,
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Love your book. I recommend, if you haven't read her book yet, get on that.
Thank you. Take care, Alice. See you soon. Well, thank you for joining us and giving Alice a chance to share her experiences on sales leadership and some of the tips and techniques to up-level that if you're a business owner, and there's ways to really get involved with your sales teams and make a difference in the growth. I want you to join us next week. We're going to have a special guest again. Her name is Lisa Magnuson, and she actually interviewed 41 VP of sales and was able to assess them and their characteristics and some of their faults and some of the things that they've learned along the way. And we're going to be able to share some of that with you. So I look forward to that as well. Take care. And at K Coaching, we do care about you and we care about your success. Thanks.